What's worse than never making a fortune? Watching your family destroy one. Across history, empires worth billions, built over generations, disappeared faster than anyone thought possible. Not because of market crashes, not because of economic downturns, but because of something far more dangerous, something that started inside the family walls. Private wars, legal battles, betrayals behind closed doors. It starts small, a bad decision here, an ignored warning there, and when the collapse finally comes, it's brutal, public, and irreversible. Today, you'll see how some of the richest families on Earth turn dynasties into dust. Because when money grows faster than structure, disaster is just a matter of time. In the late 1800s, Cornelius Vanderbilt built an empire. Railroads, shipping lines, and real estate amassed a fortune equivalent to over $200 billion today. He was a titan of industry, a symbol of American ambition. But wealth without structure is a ticking time bomb. Cornelius believed in control. He managed his empire with an iron grip, ensuring every dollar was accounted for. Yet he failed to instill the same discipline in his heirs. His son, William Henry Vanderbilt, doubled the family fortune. But with each subsequent generation, the focus shifted from preservation to indulgence. Lavish parties, opulent mansions, and extravagant lifestyles became the norm. The Vanderbilts built grand estates like the Biltmore and Marble House, symbols of their immense wealth. But behind the grandeur, the foundation was crumbling. By the mid-20th century, the fortune had dissipated. Trust funds were depleted, property sold, and the family name, once synonymous with wealth, became a cautionary tale. At a family reunion in 1973, not a single Vanderbilt was a millionaire. The empire had vanished. What happened? The Vanderbilts lacked a cohesive strategy for wealth preservation. There was no family governance, no financial education passed down, and no mechanisms to instill responsibility. Each generation acted independently, often at odds with one another, leading to fragmentation and financial decline. The story of the Vanderbilts is not just about lost wealth, it's about lost purpose. Without a unifying vision, even the greatest fortunes can evaporate. But the Vanderbilts were not alone. Another family, equally renowned, faced a downfall not just of wealth, but of trust and unity. Their story involves betrayal, legal battles, and a legacy torn apart from within. Trust and unity, two things the Vanderbilts lost slowly. But for the next family, the collapse came like a lightning strike. It wasn't about market shifts or gradual erosion. This was betrayal, played out in public, with lawsuits, exile, and eventually, murder. In the mid-20th century, Gucci wasn't just a fashion house. It was Italy's answer to American dynasties. Founded by Guccio Gucci in 1921, it grew from a small leather goods store in Florence to a global symbol of luxury, wealth, and status. Movie stars wore it. Royalty endorsed it. The name Gucci became shorthand for power and style. But behind the red carpets and velvet ropes, a different story was unfolding. The real enemies of the Gucci empire weren't competitors. They were sitting at the same family table. After Guccio's death, control passed to his sons, then to his grandsons. What followed was a textbook case of ego over governance. Paolo Gucci wanted creative freedom. Aldo Gucci wanted to protect the legacy. And Maurizio Gucci, Guccio's grandson, wanted absolute control. What started as boardroom tension escalated into full-scale family war. Paulo sued Aldo. Aldo accused Paulo of financial sabotage. Relatives spied on each other, leaked confidential documents, and turned family gatherings into hostile legal strategy sessions. In 1986, the damage became irreversible. Aldo, one of the architects of Gucci's global expansion, was sentenced to prison for tax evasion. Testimony from his own family sealed his fate. But the final blow came from Maurizio Gucci. In the early 1990s, Maurizio forced out the remaining family stakeholders, mismanaged the company, burned through cash, and in 1993 sold the last family shares to an investment group. For the first time since its founding, the Gucci family no longer owned Gucci. But the story didn't stop there. In 1995, in broad daylight, Maurizio Gucci was shot and killed outside his office in Milan. The mastermind? His ex-wife, Patrizia Reggiani, convicted of arranging the murder, driven by jealousy, money, and revenge. From red carpets to courtrooms, from fashion shows to crime scenes, the Gucci empire reduced to a cautionary tale of what happens when legacy becomes a battlefield. And while the Gucci story captured tabloids around the world, another family, operating in the shadows of global finance, was preparing for a downfall that wouldn't just ruin a name, but shake trust in financial institutions worldwide. Because when the collapse comes, sometimes it doesn't end with lawsuits or broken families. It ends with death, debt, and international scandal. Shall we step inside? The Maxwell downfall. If the Gucci story was about ego and revenge, the next collapse was about deception at a global scale. And this time, the consequences went far beyond one family. The Maxwell name became a synonym for scandal, financial fraud, and unanswered questions that still linger today. Robert Maxwell, born in 1923 in Czechoslovakia, survived the Holocaust, rebuilt his life in the UK, and rose to become a media tycoon. By the 1980s, he owned publishing empires, newspapers, and had influence stretching from London to New York. His personal fortune? Estimated in the hundreds of millions. But what the world didn't see was the financial black hole growing behind the scenes. Maxwell was aggressive, ruthless, and deeply secretive. His companies were drowning in debt, but he covered it up, moving money between accounts, using company pensions as his personal piggy bank. For years, he maintained the image of success: yachts, political connections, front-page interviews. But in reality, the empire was cracking. On November 5, 1991, Robert Maxwell disappeared from his yacht, the Lady Ghislaine, near the Canary Islands. Hours later, his body was found floating in the Atlantic Ocean. Official cause of death? Drowning. But to this day, speculation remains. Was it suicide, an accident, or something darker? And then, the truth started to surface. In the weeks following his death, investigators uncovered a financial scandal of epic proportions. Maxwell had stolen hundreds of millions of pounds from employee pension funds, covering losses, inflating stock prices, hiding debts. Thousands of employees lost their life savings overnight. Banks, investors, and pensioners were left devastated. The British government had to step in with emergency measures. The press turned on the Maxwell legacy overnight. His family, already traumatized, was pulled into public disgrace. But the most haunting part, the psychological damage left behind. His daughter, Ghislaine Maxwell, once seen as London's social elite, would years later face her own public downfall in one of the most high-profile criminal cases of the 21st century, connected to another billionaire scandal with global headlines. The Maxwell story wasn't just financial ruin, it was reputational annihilation. An empire built on influence, destroyed by fraud, lies, and secrets that died with Robert Maxwell, or at least most of them. And as the world processed the Maxwell collapse, a pattern became impossible to ignore. From old money dynasties to fashion empires to financial giants, the same silent forces kept appearing behind every downfall. Ego, unchecked power, and a total lack of governance. And if you think these stories are isolated, you're wrong, because history holds even more examples. Cases where wealth disappeared so fast, it felt like watching a dynasty evaporate in real time. Let's take a look at some of the fastest, most brutal family collapses in history.
The Vanderbilts, the Guccis, the Maxwells. 3 families, 3 different industries, same result: collapse. But they weren't alone. History is crowded with forgotten heirs, lost fortunes, and dynasties that disappeared almost overnight. Sometimes the collapse takes decades. Other times, it happens in a single courtroom decision or with one signature on divorce papers. Let's walk through a few, one by one. Fast, brutal, unforgiving. In the late 1800s, the Gilded Age produced some of the wealthiest families in American history: industrialists, railroad barons, steel magnates. Families like the Astors, the Goulds, the Rockefellers. But among them were countless heirs who burned through fortunes at unimaginable speed. Why? Lifestyle inflation. Second and third generations inherited money without purpose, without responsibility, and without any structure to preserve it. Mansions turned into hotels, art collections were sold at auctions, family jewels pawned. By the mid-20th century, many of these Gilded Age descendants were living in small apartments, a sharp contrast to the palatial estates their grandparents built. The lesson? Wealth, without discipline, is just temporary privilege. Move forward to the modern era. Sumner Redstone, a media mogul who built Viacom and CBS into global giants. A man who controlled billions with sheer willpower well into his 90s. But what happens when one powerful figure refuses to let go? For years, the Redstone empire functioned under one principle: Sumner decides everything. But as his health declined, the cracks widened. Legal battles erupted between his daughter Shari Redstone and the executives and trustees surrounding him. Court cases exposed private family arguments, mental competency questions, and governance failures at the highest level. By the time Sumner passed away in 2020, the empire had been gutted by years of infighting. Relationships destroyed, billions tied up in litigation, and the legacy tainted by the very thing that built it: control at all costs. And then there's the most personal collapse of all: divorce. In recent decades, some of the world's most powerful family fortunes have been split by decisions made in courtrooms, not boardrooms. Rupert Murdoch, his divorce settlements have cost him billions multiple times. Harold Hamm, oil tycoon, cut a single check for nearly $1 billion to his ex-wife, one of the largest divorce settlements in U.S. history. And let's not forget Jeff Bezos. The divorce from Mackenzie Scott instantly made her one of the richest women on the planet, while reshaping the ownership structure of Amazon itself. These aren't just private matters, they're legacy-shifting events with ripple effects on companies, employees, and global markets. In each case, the core issue was the same: no firewall between personal life and financial empire. Different industries, different decades, different personalities. But if you map each story side by side, patterns emerge. Unchecked ego, no succession plan, lack of governance, and emotional decisions with billion-dollar consequences. What's most haunting is how predictable these collapses become in hindsight. There are silent signals, red flags, moments where disaster could have been prevented if someone had stepped in, if structure had existed, if emotion hadn't been allowed to rule decisions. But that's the thing about legacy collapses. They never feel urgent until it's too late. And when you strip away the headlines, the scandals, the lawsuits, you're left with three silent killers that show up again and again and again. So let's pause and look at them closely, because these three are the real reason fortunes die. Chapter 5: The Three Silent Killers of Generational Wealth. Patterns don't lie. Across every family collapse we've seen, from railroads to fashion to media empires, three forces appear, again and again. Silent at first, invisible, but deadly over time. Let's name them and see how they destroy from the inside. Killer 1: Ego over governance. In the early days of any fortune, decisions are made with focus, discipline, and vision. But as wealth grows, so does ego. Leaders start making decisions based on pride, not logic. Succession plans get delayed because no one wants to give up power. Family conflicts become personal, emotional, with no board, no external accountability, and no one brave enough to say, "Stop." From the Vanderbilts to the Redstones, ego turned boardrooms into battlefields. Killer 2: Lifestyle inflation. Success brings comfort. Comfort breeds complacency. What started as a disciplined lifestyle becomes private jets, mega yachts, art collections, and 30-room mansions. Spending increases, revenue doesn't. Generational wealth isn't infinite, but when each new heir believes the money will never run out, it always does. The Gilded Age heirs, the Gucci extravagance, even the Maxwells, all fell victim to lifestyle over strategy. Killer 3: Lack of communication and planning. This is the most silent killer of all. Families avoid tough conversations. Succession plans stay locked in drawers. Heirs aren't educated on governance or financial responsibility. Decisions happen in secret. Information gets siloed. And when crisis hits, no one knows what to do. It's not the external world that kills family wealth. It's the internal silence. Ego, lifestyle, lack of communication. Three killers, always present, always underestimated. And the most tragic part? Almost every one of these collapses could have been prevented. The question is, how? Almost every empire carries the seeds of its own destruction. And in each story we've seen today, there were moments, small, almost invisible moments, where the outcome could have been different. A difficult conversation, a decision postponed, a warning ignored. The collapse didn't arrive like a storm. It crept in, through pride, through fear of change, through the quiet assumption that the legacy was untouchable. What these families needed wasn't more power, or better lawyers, or another business acquisition. What they needed was protection against themselves. A structure that forces the hard questions before the damage is done. Clear governance, external oversight, successor training, and above all, the humility to realize that wealth doesn't guarantee wisdom. Some had the resources to build it. They just didn't. Others never even saw the danger coming. And while the faces and industries change, the pattern never does. Because financial collapse rarely begins with numbers. It begins with silence, fractures, and choices made behind closed doors. Today, we looked at the headlines, the scandals, the losses. But behind every billion-dollar downfall, there's something more painful than losing money: losing control over your own legacy. If this made you pause, if it made you look at wealth, structure, and family a little differently, then maybe this was more than a story. Maybe it was a warning. Because history doesn't just repeat, it waits for the next family to make the same mistake.